are. We're 2 stops from the Barclays Center, the home of the Islanders.
Yes.
Unusual, as we know, but we met way back at Nassau Coliseum, 1985.
Yeah, a long time ago.
A long time ago. I was Stan Fischler's intern. Everyone in the hockey business knows about Stan Fischler's interns. And we met, though, probably in the Islander room after a game, had a quick chat. We're the same age, so we kind of connected, and here we are.
Years later.
All these years later.
A lot of years later.
Talking some more.
And Stan still looks the same.
Stan still looks the same. His jokes are still the same. The punchlines are the same.
We'll miss him. I left a message for him today, but he was actually at my wedding in 1987, he and his beloved wife, Shirley. And we've kept in touch all these years, and what a great man for our game, a great humanitarian father, husband, and I know we'll miss him tonight. I know it, like I think Marcia said it best, I figured he'd be crawling in here. He loves this, and so we'll miss him tonight, but it's great to have you here, Allan.
Thank you.
I think I should call you James Lipton.
We can try.
Just don't ask me my favorite swear word.
Swear words. We'll save that for the end.
Okay.
So I won't tell any of Stan's jokes, but I will go with kind of a guide we worked on together for tonight, just kind of a chronological look at your career and life.
Sure.
I mean, it's been a tremendous career and life. It continues to be. I mean, growing up in the United States, you were 15 years old the day Mike Eruzione scored that goal against the Soviet team in 1980. I think for all of us of that generation, we all felt that was the moment.
It was.
And for you, did that just spark a little bit of dreaming and fantasy, and how are we going to do this? How will I do this someday? I mean, what was that day like for you as a hockey player and American?
Well, it was special. It ignited players like myself and all the boys and girls in the United States. It was the night of my 15th birthday, so February 22nd, 1980. And we were eating Little Caesars pizza. Mike Ilitch, who now owns the Red Wings, but we played in Michigan. He had a minor league team. And believe it or not, ham and mushroom was my favorite. And everybody in New York would, ham and mushroom? Like, about sausage. But anyway, ham and mushroom was my favorite. And I remember, but the feeling that when he scored that goal, it changed everything. All of a sudden, I was born in St. Louis, raised in Michigan. It's a good story. My father was transferred from Chrysler, and we went to Michigan, and there was a lake. We lived on Williams Lake and Lakeland Arena, and just became a hockey fanatic. And that day, that goal allowed young Americans like myself to say, maybe, and college was the goal. And even then, college was way up here. Then all of a sudden, all these young American boys are playing on the 80 team and jumping around, and we're watching this enthusiasm, and ignited hockey in the United States. And for a young 15-year-old like myself watching all this, I finally thought, maybe I could play in the Olympics. There's Kenny Morrow's from Michigan, and Mark Wells. Mm-hmm. Because in Canada, in every province and in every little town, there's a professional hockey player from that area. I mean, you eat, live, and sleep hockey if you're from Canada. You're born with skates on. And so you have the bar, you know somebody from your town. When you don't know of anybody within miles away that has ever gone any further, the reach seems a lot further than it is. And then that team and that goal allowed young players like myself to actually dream bigger, which is really special.
And before you did play in 1984 for the U.S. team, the team that followed that winning team, which couldn't have been easy, you had a spectacular junior career, namely one season in Verdun in French Canada. Here you are, an American, breaking new ground yet again, 104 goals, unbelievable record breaking Guy Lafleur's records, Mike Bossy's records, head-to-head with Mario Lemieux in the scoring race. What was that like, being an American in French Canada and
Well,
setting those records?
all my classmates thought I was crazy. Like, you're leaving your senior year to go to Canada? What's wrong with you? Literally, they thought I was crazy. But I had gone to summer school, and I prepared for an opportunity. And when after watching the Russian skates before I was 15, I would watch the Russian team skate, and I told my mom and dad, I want to go live in Russia because I want to learn how to skate like the Russians. So I was a little nuts back then.
You had a lot going on.
I was like 12.
Right. Right
So,
idea, though.
Yeah, I figured I was going to go somewhere. And then this opportunity came to go play junior hockey in Montreal. Guy Lafleur was my idol. Gilbert Perreault was my idol. So to play in Montreal as a kid, looking up to Guy Lafleur and 5 minutes from the Montreal Forum, and now having a pass that I could go in there anytime because I played for the juniors, was a dream come true for a 17-year-old kid. The neat thing was I never got a chance to meet Guy Lafleur. The only way I met him was I had to break a record of his. It's a true story. I'm playing for the junior Canadians, and somehow I get off to a good start, and the consecutive points comes along. Pierre Kramer was our coach, who was Mike Bossy's brother-in-law. And I was fortunate to play on the power play and get an opportunity. And all of a sudden, I have 20 consecutive games with a point, and the team was doing well. And it's like, who's this rookie American? What's going on? I finally was able to get the 41st consecutive games for points, and that was Guy Lafleur's record. And I stopped at 44. And so Eric Taylor was the general manager, and he flew in my mom and dad, surprised me with my mom and dad and Guy Lafleur on the ice, which I'll never forget. That's how I met my idol. Guy Lafleur and Gilbert Perreault are my idols. It doesn't get better than that for
Do
me.
you
That
remember
was
what
a
he
lot of
said
fun.
to you in that moment on the ice?
I don't remember
short and
hearing
sweet?
anything. I just kind of went,
Right.
and I forgot I was in hockey equipment, so it was pretty cool.
And you topped that season off with a 5-goal game to get to 104 with 99 goals.
So-
I mean, was it surreal, sort of start to finish? That
Yeah, it was one of those storybook years where just things, the team, the way we all came together. We made a trade for Gerard Gallant, who's coaching Florida right now. He's doing a tremendous job. Lemieux, we were going head-to-head, and Laval and Verdun was this very similar to the Islander Ranger, but in a smaller town junior way. I mean, there were fights in the stands, and back then you could smoke in the arena. You'd look up in the third period and you couldn't see the scoreboard. There's so much smoke. I mean, times have changed. So, sure enough, we ended up playing Laval, and Mario had a 50-point lead at Christmas. Mario being Mario. We traded for Gerard Gallant, and I had another winger named Jean-Maurice Cool, C-O-O-L.
That's a great name.
It's a cool name. And we just clicked, and the team came together and gelled, and somehow I beat him by 50 points.
Somehow.
But he remembered 10 years later because he
Right.
came back after me hard. And I don't think he ever forgot that. But it was a great rivalry, and I'll never forget 8-7 in Laval, and then there was a big game in Verdun, and we have a game where the Laval players were in the stands fighting the Verdun patrons, and we had to run over and get off and jump in the stands with them and try to protect our own fans. So it was pretty crazy. Yeah, no, it's a true story.
Was it all in French? Was it a mixture of languages? How did you get it done there?
Yeah, you learn how to say bad words in French real early on. You don't know what they mean, but you're saying them because it sounds,
Right.
good.
More emphatic.
And you're mad. Guys,
Right.
you'd say a word and they look at you and you don't know what you said, but they're mad at you.
So your favorite swear words are all in French?
All French, yeah.
All in French.
You can ask me the limpid thing and I'll say
Okay.
in French.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Good.
PG.
So you go from Verdun to the U.S. national team, which leads into the Olympics in Sarajevo, Yugoslavia in 1984, coached by Lou Vero, a Brooklynite.
Brooklynite, yeah.
So we're in the right
Lou Vero.
place. What was that like, the pressure of following 80? You had a very talented team, but it had to be incredibly difficult with the expectations going
Yeah, I mean,
to that Olympics.
I mean, it truly was a miracle. I mean, like Herb Brooks said, we could play the game 100 times and we may not beat him again, but we beat him the time we needed to, and we appreciated what that team did even more so. But what our '84 team did with Chelios and Al Iafrate and Eddie Olachek, who I just saw over the weekend, Lou Vero, Timmy Taylor, try to think of more guys. There's a great group of guys, Bobby Mason. The interesting thing was we kind of were the PR team 4 years later and still growing hockey in the United States. So everywhere we went, there was a big reception, and I think what was great about that was the way the U.S. population of hockey fans came to really love that. Even then, 4 years later, we weren't the same team, and we ended up 2-2-2. We were 500. We got off to a slower start against Canada, but the whole year, I tell all the boys and girls when I speak to them, I said, listen, one of my greatest experiences of all time was representing my country for a whole season. The experience of playing in Sarajevo and going through Czechoslovakia. We played in Austria. We played American League teams, college teams. We had a 17-game, 21-day road trip. We went all over, and it wasn't just the 2 weeks. It was the whole experience of representing your country. And I tell anyone and everyone, if they ever get a chance to play in the Olympics and represent their country, don't pass it up. And I never in my wildest dreams envisioned that in 1998 I would have another chance as a pro. So it was kind of the bookends of my career, start and the finish.
Was it more enjoyable because you were together that whole year? I mean, it wasn't just coming together for 2 weeks, it was an entire season.
Yeah. People often ask me, what would you prefer? And I don't know, I'm a little bit of a traditionalist, and we're in a historical society, so that's good.
Right.
But I kind of like the younger players. I like the innocence. I like the fact that I just like the whole year that you're together. I look back at my Olympic experience, and it was the whole 65 games. It leading up to Sarajevo was so special. I tell a story. I mean, it could have been a different time, but on our way to Sarajevo, we had to go through the night, and they locked us in a car on a train, and we had an emergency stop, and we were told it was the Czechoslovakian police, but they got on with machine guns, and it was the middle of the night. We were going through at that time, a communist, and they locked us in, and then all of a sudden, it's 2 a.m, and these guys are walking in your rooms with machine guns. And it was a little different. And then when we were in the Olympic Village, they were guarded around the area. And then when we played, it was so special that hearing your national anthem during the opening ceremonies in Sarajevo gave me chills. Is something I'll never forget the rest of my life. So it was the whole experience. I missed my first plane as a player. The guys still joke around about that. We were on that 17-game, 21-day road trip, and we played Canada 13 times that year. So we were in O'Hare, and I was with all the guys, and we were playing video games. And the next thing I know, they're all gone. I'm 18 years old, and I was just playing a video game, and I went to the front desk, and the lady said, okay, so where are you going? I don't know. She said, well, what airline? I don't know. I'm with the U.S. Olympic hockey team. We're on a 17-game, 21 road. I don't know. I just know we're in Chicago.
Right.
So she finally tracked it down, and she said, you're going to Battle Creek, Michigan. You're playing them. And I said, yeah, we're going to Michigan. That's right. You're at gate so-and-so, you're U.S. Air. I ran down to the gate, and the guys, as the plane, they're waving from the mirror. I'm in the window like, come on. So I caught the next flight, and I never missed a flight after that.
After that. So did Lou Vero have any Brooklyn wisdom that he shared with the team with you through that year?
Louis was a character. He was a great coach. He loved Tarasov. He loved teaching Russian philosophy, and he'd wear gloves. He'd wear like mitten gloves, like ski gloves. And he loved quoting. He loved the style of teaching. I loved the fact that Lou was an innovator. He was not afraid to think out of the box. And we had a really talented team. We might have peaked a little bit early, and sometimes I think we were doing so much off the ice and on the ice, and like on this tour, I think we had this unbelievable run in January. I wish we could have bottled that. But the Olympics is so short, you got to get off to a great start. But Lou was great, and I still talk to Lou years later. He's a special guy. I've never met probably too many more people that love the game as much as Lou, and loves spaghetti and pasta too, because he's a big Italian. He's always talking Italian food, and yeah, but special guy. Yeah, he would always talk about playing roller hockey and the Mullen brothers,
right,
and New York, and so no, he was a great man.
That is truly Brooklyn. And this whole year, you knew you were heading for the Islanders afterwards. Somehow, in the middle of a Stanley Cup run, they pulled off a trade with the then Colorado Rockies and acquired their first-round pick, which became you, number 3 in 1981. So this whole time, the Islanders are waiting. Was that on your mind? Did you think about what that's going to be like, or did it just sort of end the Olympics, 19 years old? There you are in the room with Potvin, Bossy, Gillies.
Yeah, it was surreal. I literally was told the whole time as a 18-year-old that once the draft came, Detroit was picking 4th, and Hartford was picking 2nd. And everyone had said before the draft, you're going to Hartford or you're going to Detroit, you're going to Hartford. So it was kind of ingrained that it was one or the other. And I'm sitting there with my mom and dad in Montreal, where I played junior hockey, and obviously the Olympics, where we traveled all over. And I'm sitting there, and Brian Lawton goes number 1 to Minnesota. Sylvain Turgeon goes number 2. And I turned to my mom and dad, and I said, well, it looks like I might be coming home. And then I hear my name. And they said, New York Islanders. And honestly, I was so excited, but I was told that you're either going 2 or 4 the whole time. And then I realized, wow, this is a Stanley Cup. What an unbelievable thing. And when I was 15, I tell this story because it's 4 months after we won the gold medal in 1980, raking leaves and spring cleaning. My dad put us to work all the time. And he said, come on inside, the Islanders are in overtime. It was a national televised game. We came in, and to this day, I remember going downstairs, we stood up for the overtime. And it was probably 6-7 minutes. It was probably about 10-15 minutes we were inside watching. And I still see it in my mind. It was, Henning passes it to Danelli. He opens up and slides it to Bobby Nystrom, tips it, and here we are in Waterford, Michigan, jumping up and down. And he said, do you even know where Long Island is? I said, no, it's in New York somewhere. So it kind of put Long Island on the map for a young boy in Michigan. The irony of that story is that 4 years, almost a little less than 4 years, March 1st, a 19-year-old kid who looks like he's 12, wide-eyed, Midwestern boy, is centering John Tonelli and Bobby Nystrom for his first hockey game. And who would have thought? So I look back and you see Eruzione scoring goals. A lot of people don't give credit to Bobby Carpenter, Joey Mullen, New York. Those guys did not play on the Olympic team, but they went on and started out having really great pro careers early on. If Bobby Carpenter doesn't score 53 goals in his second or third year, that was the year of my draft. 3 Americans went in the top 5 that year. So it wasn't just the 1980 team which kind of opened the doors. It was the Joey Mullins, and then it was the Bobby Carpenters, and then it came to our generation who I like to think the 96 World Cup team was really a byproduct of what the 1980 team inspired young boys and young American boys to to want to give back something later on. It took us 16 years, but I think Joey Mullen and Bobby Carpenter really, as they opened the gates for American hockey players, they blew it open and said, come on guys, we can do this. And then you look back at the 60 team, and there were some great players before, but that was really the impetus to, I think, the generations that are coming of American players.
So here it is, but it's weeks after the Olympics. You're with the Islanders now. They're going for the 5th straight Stanley Cup. Second game, Toronto, you score a hat trick. And there's a great Bobby Nystrom story you've told me that goes with that day. That sort of cemented you right away with these guys that room.
It brings back memories. It's a good question because my dad was a Maple Leaf fan. So as a kid growing up in Michigan, Hockey Night in Canada was every Saturday night. It was da-da-da-da-da-da. I mean, that was, that's what we did. So my dad was, I was a Canadiens fan, Guy Lafleur. He loved Toronto. So he drove up to watch my first game in person at Maple Leaf Gardens. And I don't know how it happened, but it was almost kind of one of those things that just happened, meant to be. But I was able to score my first goal in front of my dad, in front of his favorite building, against his favorite team. Wasn't happy about that. He was happy. Then I somehow got a second goal, got an assist, somehow got a hat trick, got another assist. We won 11-6. Al Arbour came and kicked the trash can. He said, "You gave up 6 goals." He was upset. I'm serious. He was really upset. But somehow Bobby Nystrom, and we were all 1, 2, and 3 stars. I was like, this can't be happening. And before that, I get slashed by, I get run from behind by Jim Korn. And I turned around and I slashed him, and then Bobby Nystrom came in and just nailed him, hit him hard. So I received my first 2-minute penalty for slashing, I believe it was, and Bobby was a big guy, and Jim Korn was 6'4", and I just turned 19, and Bobby Nystrom turned to me on the left, and we're in Maple Leaf Gardens, and Don Cherry's going crazy. He said, "Kid, don't ask me any questions, go straight to the bench." And I almost said, "Okay, Mr. Nystrom." And I didn't. And I literally skated right to the bench. And before I got to the bench, I remember Trotz stood up, Clark Gillies stood up, and I just turned, and Bobby Nystrom grabbed Jim Korn. To this day, he went right-handed, he went left-handed, he went right-handed. He threw about 22 punches to Jim Korn's 1. And we got out, and the first thing my dad said, and I said, he said, "I know now why these guys are champions. It's my second game. This guy took liberties." And Bobby Nystrom basically took care of him and let him know, you don't do that. And I immediately felt to part of the team, and I knew that these guys are special because they stick up for each other like that. My dad says, "Now you know why they're champions." I said, "Yeah." It wasn't the 3 goals, it wasn't the 2 assists. It was like, we got your back, even though it's your second game, you're one of us now. And to me, I'll never forget that. And Don Cherry still talks about it. He said, I think his line was, he said, "You don't want to fight a guy who loves to fight." Jim Korn never came near me for the next 7 years or 6 years.
Of course, right. Why would he? Right. Why would he? So now it's on to the Stanley Cup playoffs. Drive for 5. It was such a scene here. I mean, It was so close. You play the Rangers in the first round, probably one of the most epic showdowns that ends with Kenny Morrow, Olympic hero, who all he did was go on to win 4 Stanley Cups.
Oh, yeah.
Scoring that goal in overtime in Game 5. I mean, was it just like one thing after another where you just couldn't believe the drama you were encountering as a teenager, an Islander? And
yeah, it was surreal. Do you think Maloney's goal was high stick?
Yeah, I think it was a little.
You think so?
I'm watching it again and again.
Yeah,
I think
he
got a break there. But
he became an Islander later, so he was a line mate. But I asked him. He said it was good. I said,
Bob Brook, Mikko Makela, very close for the
yeah.
Rangers in overtime. Very close.
You know, it was surreal, Alan. This is everything a kid ever dreamed of. You know, he comes to the Islanders, and somehow I got off to a good start. Al Arbour said, "Hey, kid, go with it. Here's your carrot and play on the power play. And it was everything you could dream of. And then we went on a roll. And the thing that was special about that team, and I always tell everybody that Al Arbour is really our Vince Lombardi of hockey. He was brilliant. I mean, Scotty Bowman, his body of work is amazing, and he's won so many Stanley Cups, and he's a genius. Al Arbour took and molded a bunch of young boys and turned them into men, and we marched for a long time. And that 2 years leading up to it, and even that year against the Rangers, they went to the finals. And then the year later, I mean, that might be the best 5 or 6 years of any team, 19 consecutive playoff wins. The guys were beat up at the end. They were warriors. I mean, Tinelli was hurt and Bossy was hurt. Potvin was hurt. I would walk in the room and they were draining Kenny Morrow's knee right before the game. I'm like, ow, I never seen stuff come out of a knee like that. I mean, it looked like motor oil, but he played. I remember Dave Langevin couldn't lift his arm and they put him in a strap, and they were just warriors. And it was a gift to kind of catch the tail end of what those guys did. And Al was the leader. Al was the general. He was the coach. He just knew what to say and how to push the buttons. And he was really like a father figure to all those guys too. And myself, he knew how to bring what he thought was the best out in you, and he had a special way. So he's sorely missed, and I know this is a big tribute year to Al, and we miss him. I got a chance to see him a few months before he passed away, and got a chance to have some good laughs and thank him for what he did and how he helped me out to turn into a player, and actually a lot of life lessons. You know, I've been lucky. I had a father who I could call a gentleman, who was all about teaching values and principles. And I had a coach, I would say, who was very similar. And they say in your lifetime, and my mother also, so your parents, your teachers, and your coaches. And I feel very blessed that I had those in my life. So
among all the games with Al behind the bench and at practice, just encountering him, is there a favorite story or two that trumps them all?
Oh, there's so many Al stories. Yeah. The one that I probably laughed the most at, I remember, was we were playing in the playoffs, and we were playing Washington in the playoffs. And Al was so mad, and he was such a competitor, but he stayed so composed. I mean, if you think of the great coaches, you know, the Bowmans and you look at Tom Landry and Chuck Noll and some of the coaches, they seem pretty quiet. You know, they're pretty composed. Phil Jackson. Al was so mad at the referees one night that we lost the game, and he slammed the door and he tried to bring him over, and I'd never seen him this animated. And the next thing I know, they bring him in, and he's like, his shoulders separated. He was so mad, he ran at the official's door and jumped up and kicked with 2 legs to try to open the door, and he fell on his shoulder.
Ouch.
So the next day, the coach comes in. He's like, well, we're going to overcome this. We're going to do this. And if your coach can go try to kick down a door, you know, and try to go after come on. But his passion, there's so many Al Arbour stories, but he just had a way of knowing what each person kind of that needed. And he was willing to let you be mad at him for 10 years after your hockey career if he thought that was what's going to bring the best out of you. And I thought, you know, I didn't realize all that till years later. I was lucky I got a chance to thank him. And I think every guy who ever played for Al Arbour has that kind of a story, because he cared. Like most coaches, they're looking at you and they're thinking, what are you going to have to do so I don't lose my job? And I'm going to get it out of you. Right. Al cared about the person and wanted to know about your family. Here's a good story. So my daughter Sarah's born, and it's the greatest time because you have kids, and she's sleeping in the room. Of course, she's waking up, and I'm trying to help out. I'm trying to play hockey. You don't want to miss this. It's your first child, and all excited. And about a month goes by, 6 weeks go by, and we're skating around, and Al says, "Hey, how's Sarah doing?" I said, "Oh, Al, she's great. So much fun. She's starting to make noises," and just looking at her face, and he's like, "Yeah, that's great. I'm so happy for you." He says, "How you feeling?" I said, "Pretty good. Pretty good. It's a lot of waking up and working." He says, "Yeah, you've played horse shit for the last 6 weeks."
Suddenly.
So then he just skates away. He says, see me in my office after the practice. That's the longest practice you'll ever have, because, so sure enough, went through the practice, and Al had a way of looking at you. So you would walk in, and here I am, I'm 25, I think, 24, 25. And he takes off his glasses, I just remember, and then he would rub his eyes, and then he would just stare at you with his big eyes, and you'd be like, "Okay, Al, what do you..." He said, "Listen," he said, "Pat, greatest time in my life was on a Saturday morning when my 4 kids would jump in and cartoons were on and they were yelling, 'Daddy, Daddy,' and I actually got to stay there and just enjoy having my kids with me." He says, "That's the best memories in my life." He said, "Enjoy your daughter, but here's the deal. You're going to have to find another room to sleep in the night before a game, and you're going to have to find a room after a game to sleep in. And that's what you're going to do." I said, "Okay, Al."
And there comes 50 goals, 40 goals, 50 goals, 40 goals.
But he cared about the family, and he'd ask about your wife and your kids. And so he created an extended family, and you could see why those guys would go through a wall and further. And what do you need? They were warriors. They battled. And some guys, he pushed the button and they'd be mad at him, and some guys, he just had a way about him, and I was blessed. And I always liked Ted Nolan, because Ted Nolan was the closest thing that reminded me of Al Arbour. He cared about his players, and guys would go through the wall, and those guys, those kind of coaches are hard to come by.
Now, your Islander career was interesting. I mean, you didn't get back to the finals after '84. You probably felt like you might, with all that talent. You should. Things have a funny way of working out or not working out. But in 1987, you're in this epic series with the Capitals. Yeah. Al Arbour's not the coach that year. It's Terry Simpson, after all those years, a different coach. But you're in this epic battle, Game 7, Twilight Zone personified.
Yeah.
1 overtime, 2 overtimes, 3 overtimes, 4th overtime. I heard that people left the game, went to a party, came back to the game.
Somebody came before, they were going to get married. They got married, had the reception, then came back. It's a true story.
So it's epic stuff. Bob Mason, your Olympic teammates, right in net.
Oh, yeah.
Washington. The game
still
may
to this
never
day
end. It's a Game 7. Guys are running on fumes on top of fumes. So what happened in that 4th overtime?
So it was surreal. I mean, we battled back from 3 games down to 1. There was only one other team that had overcome being down 3 games to 1. And Trotz scored with 5 minutes to go. It was a backhander through Mason's leg. It's 2-2. And it just seemed like the first 5 minutes of every period, we went all out, tried to score, and then the next 15 minutes we were hanging on, trying to. If it was today's rules, it'd be a penalty every shift. The clutching and grabbing and jumping and diving and knocking each other over. I had permanent bruises. Well, not permanent. I had bruises for about 2 months because Bobby Gould would always come up with his stick, and I had my gloves open, and I must have taken 50 faceoffs that night. But you're not thinking, and you're just. We got to win this game. We got to find a way to win this game.
So and you're at the Cap Center in Washington, so your enemy
territory. We're at Landover, so we're in the Cap Center. It's dark. Yeah, people were sleeping.
It's like the Barclays Center now, actually, very dark, similar.
Very similar.
Yep.
It's a good analogy. I didn't think of that. And so all of a sudden, Mikko Makla and I we asked for oxygen. What were we thinking? So we're putting our feet up, we're laying down, we're trying to get the blood in, anything. Back then, there was this drink called Carbo Pro. It was,
What was that?
it was like probably 100 milligrams or grams of caffeine or whatever. It wasn't literally, because we were up to 5, but it was, we
Right.
thought it was good. It was iced tea Carbo Pro. So the guys are drinking that, and Clarkie said he lost 12 pounds of all water weight. He
Right.
literally he said he was 12 pounds. So they bring us the oxygen, we take the oxygen, and Miko and I go, when we somehow play, and the whole team just rallied, and I literally turned to the trainer. I tell the story. He took a bottle and said, "Hey, Pop," he used to call me Pop, "you're going to get one. I can feel it." And he squeezed the water bottle down my neck, and I was like, whoa. And as you said earlier, the organist started playing da-da-da-da-da, music from the Twilight Zone. And I had just a moment where I just clicked out, and I went, 7 periods, it's almost 2 o'clock, 75 shots. And there's people sleeping in the stands.
What's going on?
I said, is this really happening?
I was listening on the radio, and they ran out of in-between period guests. They were recycling them
Yeah.
by the 7th overtime.
I think they brought on the married couple at one point.
Pretty much.
So they said, "You're up," and I covered for Gordy Dineen. Gordy, I never played defense, so I was covering for a defenseman. What's the odds of that? He came around, Gordy, great guy, and he went around the net, and he went to pass it. It went off Rod Langway's stick, and I caught it on my backhand, turned around, spun around, and I have to tell you, I've never shot a puck like that, ever. And it was on rolling. I just said, just shoot it. By that time, the goalies saw, it was like beach balls. It wasn't hockey pucks. Kelly Rudy was just going like this, and Bob Mason, and he was screened. Dale Henry, we joked around because he looked like Bruce Hornsby, and we thought he had a big head. Maybe his helped screen, but anyway, he was a great guy. Joke around. But Langway laid down, and I just shot it, turned, and I heard the post. And then all of a sudden, I saw Mason drop down, and our guys started jumping up and down. And it was a moment where pure adrenaline for about 2 minutes, and we're jumping, and then we just crashed.
Complete exhaustion.
And actually, I did the interview with Stan right after the goal. I remember Bill Torrey gave me a hug, and then.
What was Stan drinking to stay awake? That's a question.
Does Stan sleep? He sleeps upside down.
Minimal. The coffee, a lot of coffee.
A lot of coffee.
I'm sure.
But we didn't get home till 7 a.m., went to Easter Mass at 12, came home, slept, drove to the Coliseum at 6, got on a bus at 7. We played Philly the next night, and we beat him 2-1. Miko Makla scored in overtime.
Is that your
pretty cool.
highlight moment, obviously, just because it was you that scored it in that moment at that time as an Islander?
You look back at your career, and I was very blessed to play pro hockey. It was a privilege. But there are moments where I think they were stepping stones, and that was a moment I think that allowed me to take another step as a player. That was one of those moments. To this day, I run into people, and they hate me still in Maryland. Literally, Barry Trotz did an article this year.
I read that, yep.
And he said
Still
that
not happy.
Allan LaFontaine, we're going to get rid of that guy. That's 30 years ago.
And he just became coach last year, and they
Almost 30 years, yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
no cups for the cap, so they
I think he's trying to break the curse, and they want to establish
trying everything new with them, but
No, and
it's true.
Some of my daughters went to Miami of Ohio and Marist, but there were some kids from Maryland, and their parents are telling them, tell them not to come in our state anymore. We don't, come on. 29 years ago, whatever, get over it.
A couple of years later, though, the Islanders were going through a change. The old guard had either retired, been traded. It was in a different team, different ownership, shaky times. You decide changes are coming, and the trade to Buffalo happens. Suddenly, you're new uniform, new city, still in New York State. What was that feeling like to leave Long Island after starting everything here?
It was tough. My wife's from Long Island. She's a Huntington girl. And, I never envisioned myself playing anywhere else. But the ownership changed, and I would say it changed. There seemed to be less of a a commitment. They were down in Florida, and the organization went through some real breaking it apart and trying to rebuild it, and it was struggling to do that. And when I was traded to Buffalo, I never thought I would ever be traded, but when I was traded, once I embraced it, the fans up there were great too. And I kind of looked at my career as everything I learned from these great champions and a great coach like Al Arbour and the experiences I had, and I was going to now take that and make sure those experiences I would apply what I learned and try to help be a contributing leader and a player, and things seemed to really blossom and take off and gel, and I had some really special years up there too. It got off to a good start, except for when I broke my jaw.
Right,
anyway.
the broken jaw was pretty quickly on.
Yeah.
The knee injury soon thereafter. But you put up these unbelievable numbers, all kinds of records. You had Alex McGillney scoring 76 goals on your wing. You score over 50. You almost had a whole line of 50s with David Chuck in Buffalo. But number 16 would become such a favorite up there. You became the captain. Is it just as special a time because of what you achieved as a leader, as a captain, and then charity-wise in Buffalo, that experience?
It really was. I kind of took, and I always credit the Islanders for every one of the players who were involved in the community. They all gave back. And not just to be an Islander, part of wearing that jersey and being an Islander was you get involved in the community. They were a great example. And I got involved. I was asked to meet some very special kids during my playing days, and especially during my injuries. My wife and I joke around and say, it seems like any time I had a major injury, I'm pregnant. We have another child coming. So, so it's true.
It's true.
You're so busy. You're on the road and you're skating all the time, and it's cold in Buffalo. But but I have amazing special memories, and hockey I look at now and I feel fortunate. It was really a stepping stone to what I'm doing today, and I'm working at the league. But I think Mark Twain said it best: the two most important days of your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. And I met a special kid named Robert Schwegler, and I was asked to visit him, and I just had my knee reconstructed, which was tough because it's the first time I ever missed hockey in years. And I just got off of crutches, and my wife was like, I'm sure there's something for you to learn. There's a reason why things happen. And I received a letter to go visit this young boy who's dealing with a rare form of leukemia, and he was in isolation. And another special girl who just had spinal meningitis and both her legs from her knees down, Angela Miliotto, and part of her arm. And I was like, wait a second here, whatever I can do, my injuries are very trivial. These are life-threatening, and these are children and kids. And so I would go and play video games with Robert, and I put a cap and gown on for 3 months, 4 months, and three times a week. And I was always the Islanders, I was always the Rangers and Sega. And I tied him once. He beat me every time. He was really good. And he would laugh and would smile, and both he and Angela were these amazing spirits with amazing courage. And I thought, I'm a hockey player, but yet these are like friends to me. And we just had these great times together. And you know this story, because things happen in your life and you never know when it's going to happen. And I just got done playing, and we were laughing, and I'd taken my cap off and the gown, and this nurse comes over and she said, I just wanted to say thank you for playing with Robert. It means so much. And I said, it's the least I could do. He's my friend. I love coming in and seeing him. And then she grabbed my arm and she started to cry. And she said, you don't understand, do you? And then she had my full attention. And she said, do you know it's the only time this young boy smiles? And then that hit me. You know, I got to go home and go see a movie, and I got to see my wife and kids, and Robert was in this isolation room 24/7, and you know, I should go see him more often. But to have a video game and to have an experience and to laugh, and then she told me he doesn't smile a lot. And I was able to get Robert to some games, and I got to know his parents very well. I still speak to this day. This is back in '96. And we thought, didn't know just playing a video game and laughing would bring joy to such a special young boy. And we got him down to Make-A-Wish, and Robert passed away about 3 months later. And what Robert taught me was just the courage and the moment and how frail life really is. And it's just not fair with kids. And I only remember him smiling and laughing. And so his parents were amazing. And I said, you know what, if we can have a moment with a child and play a video game, why can't we build rooms, and why can't we build centers and create the walls change colors, and there's video games, and there's, you know, video conferencing pods, and there's computers, and there's no doctors and nurses who I have the greatest respect for, but this is a safe haven. This is an oasis. This is where a kid can go and laugh. And then we started building them. Edwin Schlossberg was the designer in New York. And then we did a deal with Microsoft so that kids that were in isolation, we would bring in these kiosks that connected to the Lion's Den rooms, and Microsoft, so for a boy like Robert, he could play, and then they had a camera with the monitor and an Xbox 360, and they created the first ever private online gaming network, so that all the kids in the rooms and the kids who had the kiosk could all see each other and play games with each other. And just forget for a moment what's happening to them and just be a kid. And probably one of the greatest things I've ever seen is their courage, because they're the ones that are going through this, and the families and the siblings, everybody, it affects the whole family, but yet they're the ones that are the strong ones. And they're the ones that give the family strength, but yet they're going through this. And I was always amazed at the courage of these kids. And so when I retired, I wrote a book called Companions in Courage. All the proceeds went, and everything, and the inspiration for Companions in Courage is Robert and Angela and Paul and Jessica and these amazing children that they weren't dealt. Some of them are doing great today, but a few of them weren't dealt the best cards. But the hope was their inspiration would then be a conduit of inspiration through us to create these rooms and create these experiences. And we now have almost 20 Lions Den, 400 kiosks around North America, and touch about 50,000 children in children's hospitals in North America. And to me, that's the biggest goal anybody will ever score is giving back to kids and helping somehow through your life. And I think my greatest regret, Allan, would have been not realizing that you were in a position to help. And what's so great now is all these players and athletes, and it doesn't matter if you're an athlete, but anytime you influence kids, or anytime you're looked up to, or I believe there should be that moral responsibility just to give back, try to make it a better place. And they're the ones who taught me what courage was really all about, and they're the ones that inspired Companions in Courage. And so the passion and the excitement and all the energy comes from their inspiration. And I feel blessed to have known them, and I still talk to Robert's parents, and years later they choose to remember those moments of when he had pure joy,
Smiles.
and that they think he's helping guide Companions in Courage and helping more kids. And so life is fragile, and hockey's been a great stepping stone and taught me a lot, and so you just try to do. The Islanders were a good example of giving back in the community. Bobby Nystrom, the other guy in New York was Rod Gilbert. Those guys paved the road to say, you're not just a hockey player. It's the community who helps you. It's the community who comes and pays to watch you. You have a responsibility to get back, and if you're going to wear this jersey, you have to get involved in the community, and I was grateful for that example.
Before you did, and this was all spectacular, you start Companions in Courage in '97. Before you also finished up with the Rangers, probably couldn't have seen that coming, but that was the end. You joke you never had to switch license plates since you spent your whole career in New York State.
True.
So,
I'm the only athlete in any
so
sport.
I think so. You should
It's been traded twice and never changed his license
free
plate. Even when I was
inspections.
living in Connecticut, I kept my New York plate. It's a true story.
Excellent.
I don't know how I got away with that one, but
But you did go through your travails with concussions, Islanders, 1990 on the Garden Ice during the playoffs. James Patrick, a very serious one later with the Sabres in 1996. How did that shape your future out of hockey and carve your last years in hockey? How did you overcome that tough period?
well, that was, and we've talked about this, and to this day, I shared this story earlier. When we were playing the Rangers in the 89-90 first round, the Stanley Cup playoffs, with about 5 minutes to go or so, there was a play. James Patrick is a clean player, but Chris Nyland was kind of steering me into him. Chris is a great guy, but maybe not as clean of a player, but good guy. And I ran in and I caught the shoulder pad, and I was my real first documented concussion. And I was out and I was having convulsions, and I was actually swallowing my tongue. And it was, looking back at it now, I was put on a headboard, and I just kept coming in and out. And I'll never forget being wheeled off on the stretcher. It was, I don't know, 10 minutes later probably. And I heard some of the fans yelling, LaFontaine, I hope your neck's broken. I hope you die. Like, no, this was a time. And we were the arch rivalry, and of course, I'm sure they didn't mean it. So my sister-in-law and my brother, they're crying because they're hearing all this and they're wondering what's going on. And I'm strapped and in a headboard, and I came out of it. Doc, get this thing off me. I got to get back on the ice. And he just said to me, the game's over. And I guess I went out again, and my wife and my father-in-law were driving in, and of course she came in, she wanted me to quit hockey right there. So they put me in an ambulance, and as we're leaving the back entrance of Madison Square Garden, the game had let out, and the fans had known that the stretcher wasn't bad enough. Let's shake the ambulance. They're trying to tip over the ambulance. There's probably 50 people. And I was on the headboard, and I was laying down. I was trying to look this way, and the doors opened up, and the attendant was screaming and yelling, and then the ambulance was, I thought, man, I really hit my head because this thing's really shaking. And it was shaking, that's the whole thing. But somehow we were able to finally get to Lenox Hill, and I had a pretty good concussion, and I was cleared to play for Game 6. I had no symptoms. Today's protocols are a little bit different. And the joke was that I went to Buffalo in between for those 6 years and loved those 6 years. And then I came back as a Ranger, and this is no lie. I play the first game I'm playing as a Ranger is against the New York Islanders. And there's 2 minutes to go, and I think Brian Leach took a shot, and I tipped it, and we tied the game. And I get the standing ovation, and I swore I heard someone, I'm so glad you're not dead, LaFontaine.
It was the same guy. It had to be the same guy.
Had to be the same guy. Now,
Ranger fans, that's typical. So you play with Gretzky,
Yeah.
Adam Graves, you're around Rod Gilbert, you get the other side of the New York hockey dose for a year.
Yeah.
You've spoken about it many times, how grateful you were that you had that bonus year coming out of the concussion times, and you're back in New York City. special stuff, even as an ex-Islander star, to be a Ranger?
You know what, it was, and I'll say this to you, when you've had post-concussion syndrome, and it's a big deal, believe it or not, the hit I took in Buffalo in '96, from that incident, and because I was playing when I shouldn't have been playing at the time, our president, Larry Quinn, decided we can't allow this to happen again, and we baseline tested every player that January, February. And then, to the National Hockey League's credit, they adopted baseline testing and had every team in the National Hockey League baseline tested in 1997 from that situation. But playing for the Rangers and coming back after post-concussion syndrome, I could understand if nobody ever wanted to play again. And I do know what the dark places and the depression, and I went through, I had migraine headaches every day for 3 weeks, and debilitating. And we didn't know a lot about it back then. So I was lucky because my brain found its way back, and I replugged in, and I got passionate again, and I got excited. And it was 6 months later, but it was a long 3 or 4 months, and then 5 and 6, things were coming back to me again. I felt I really still wanted to play. So when I went to the Rangers, I have to tell you, I never appreciated the game. I appreciated every practice, my teammates, every game. It was an event at Madison Square Garden. The Rangers treated me first class, and to this day still treat me first class. And I guess the silver lining is when something's taken away from you and you go through that dark tunnel and you wonder if you're ever going to just be okay. And then your brain kind of reconnects, and now your passion comes back and your excitement, and now you can actually play. And then to have given that chance and play the way I did to help the team and play in the Olympics and have some things happen, and then have a hit again, I think it allowed me to kind of have closure, and it allowed me, because I know my personality, if that hit in Buffalo would have defined me, and I would have had to retire, and I wouldn't have been able to come back, I think it would have haunted me. I think it would have bothered me for a long time. So I felt like I had a second chance, and I knew all the warnings, and I sought out the best doctors, and Dr. James Kelly, he's been amazing, and he was the one who cleared me to play, and the following year, he was the same doctor who said, I can't let you go back and play.
Ironically, after you ran into a teammate, Mike Keane, during a game with the Rangers.
We used to, in the locker room, always see who was taller, Mike Keane or myself. And I always said I was taller, and he always thought he was taller. Mm-hmm. He was on the wrong side of the ice. I jokingly tell him this to this day. Of course, I didn't see him coming because he's shorter than I was. Right.
And bang.
And we collided. It was one of those. And I saw stars, and I had a concussion. And just like the doctor said, it's probably going to take you almost as long. And you have to know the risks. But I said, I want to know if you're fearful of any permanent long-term. He said, no. But he said, I can't tell you that after the next one, probably. And sure enough, it took me another 6 months. The symptoms weren't as severe. Mm-hmm. But I know what it's like to go through it twice. And so even then, when he said to me, I'm not clearing you to play, there's 50% of me that was relieved, and the other 50% of me. We don't know how to quit. We don't know how to give up. We don't know how to say no. Otherwise, we would have never got there.
Right.
So the last person you should ask if they're okay is someone who's been concussed. And I'll share this story because the Ranger fans. I was a Sabre, and I think it was it was Hardy, defenseman, who caught me in one of the corners. And I remember coming back after I had my first bad concussion in Madison Square Garden. I subsequently had one every year after that, which is sometimes the case because you're more susceptible. But I remember being called off the ice because something was wrong, and the doctor took me. This is back during the early, probably 93, 94, around there, 95. And pulled me into the room and he gave me the test and did the eye, and I was going to pass this. I want to play. Don't tell me I'm not okay. I want to play. Then he asked me, who's the president? Tell me, these numbers backwards. Okay, last question. Who's in net for the opposing team and what's the score? And I think it says, it's Van Beesbroek, it's 2-1. He said, get your stuff off. It's Richter, it's 3-2. You're done.
Detail.
But we're competitors.
Right.
And so the National Hockey League and the Players Association has done an amazing job at protocols now. And everything's evolved to a place where, the Rule 48's been defined and hits to the head, and there's a real almost concussion team in each building that allows for the right treatments and making sure players don't go back. And really it's diagnosis and treatments of when it does happen, and we've learned so much. And, at the end of the day, it's such a great game, and you don't want to see anybody get hurt. But I'm fortunate because I got the right advice and I got the right care at the right time, and I got to play a game that I loved and I'm privileged to have done, and it's taught me so much and brought me and met my wife and kids, and so really hockey's been the core of everything in my life. It all started with the game.
You did achieve point number 1,000 as a Ranger, a goal against, ironically, Garth Snow, the current general manager of the Islanders now, and then you had a party for your retirement on St. Patty's Day, appropriately enough, correct, in 1999?
Yeah.
So did that truly...
You got a good memory.
I remember numbers and dates. It's a
You're
thing.
good.
What did that bring it, like that day, were you okay to say, okay, I'm good, I've done it all, didn't win the Stanley Cup, but did pretty much World Cup with America in '96. I mean, you came back, you came back again and again and again. You achieved, you put up the numbers. Was it okay that day?
Yeah, the World Cup was pretty special, getting the Stanley Cup Finals, but all the experiences, the teams. When you look back years later, it's being on the ice and laughing with the guys and being competitive. It's what you did your whole life. So I was able to truly put closure. And Al Arbour taught me this early on, and I said this earlier, he was a great teacher. He never handed you anything. My first 15 games, he threw a carrot, and okay, boy, let me see what you can do. And then my first 2 years, he pulled me back and said, okay, now you got to earn it, which helped me leave the game with a great appreciation. I know a lot of guys, some of them leave the game bitter, and even through all the injuries and experiences, I left feeling so fortunate. I was this little kid from St. Louis. I was hoping to go to college and move to Michigan, and let alone play 15 years in the National Hockey League when you put it in perspective. And I'll give you a quick story of Al Arbour because I want to see if they want to ask questions, if anyone wants to ask any questions. But my first full season, Al Arbour made me fourth line center after I scored 13 goals in 15 games. Okay,
Tough.
kid,
Right.
get behind Butch Goring and Brent Sutter and Brian Trottier. And I said, he's going to make you earn it. And he pulled me off. I never was allowed to take a face-off in my own defensive zone. And I was never going to give him the satisfaction. So I would always go to the face-off circle, and I'd always line up, and then I'd always peek out of my left eye and be like, oh, shit, here comes Trottier. And then I would skate of shame because I was just pulled off because I'm not good enough to take a face-off in my own zone. For 2 years, it's a long 2 years, every time you get ready to take a face-off. So I'd go into practice and I'd start working out and work on my face-offs and try to get bigger and stronger, and sure enough, pulls me off again. Here comes Butch Goring. I'm like so mad. But I never gave him satisfaction of knowing I was. Then finally, during the end of my second full season, we're in Philadelphia, and sure enough, just like clockwork, I go face-off circle, I look up, and then there's nobody coming.
Finally.
There's nobody coming. So I kind of got scared.
Right. Now what?
But then I got excited, and I turned my wrist over, and I could feel it, and I said, there is no way. I waited 2 years for this moment. And it was Richie Sutter from Philadelphia. And I could see the puck go in slow motion, and I came down so hard on my stick that the puck and his stick flew into the corner.
Into the corner.
And he never took me off again.
Again. You had to earn it.
You had to earn it. And it was one of the greatest lessons because I had scored all those points in junior, and I was always on a team and considered a player to play all the time. But unless you learn to be a 200-foot player, you could play defense, you could play offense, you had to commit. So every time I took a face-off zone, defensive zone face-off, I had the greatest respect and appreciation. And it also made me lock into the moment because I had to earn it. So, thanks to Al Arbour.
Fast forward now, all the way to last season, the final year of Nassau Coliseum, the emotional end of 43 years on Long Island. All the legends came out, had a night, dropped the puck, Potvin, Trottier, Nystrom, Gillies. You had your night in March. You brought Clinton Brown, who you met as a youngster 30 years before. I mean, the emotion of the year, the emotion of the goodbye, how was that to have your night last March 24th at the Coliseum?
It was really special. I hadn't been back at the Coliseum in a long time, and I thought the fans were so great all those years. Clinton Brown was one of the young boys who had over 30 surgeries, and he had obviously at the time it was a dwarfism. He had to go through all these different surgeries, and he had a halo, I remember, and I would call him in Minnesota, and his mom, Cheryl, and Clinton Brown Sr., they were amazing. She would bring him down to practice, and I've got pictures of Clinton when I was 19, 20 on the ice, and I was having playing goalie, and we actually played video games at his house, and he showed me the pictures, and I think the real Lions Den room started in Clinton Brown's house. We played video, and yet he was hooked up in his halo. The most positive guy I've ever met in my life. And he has the most amazing perspective, and he does motivational speaking now. And I thought, there's not a greater fan, and that's went through more and loved the players, loved the guys, that I said, I would love, and I was honored to be one of the guys to drop one of the last pucks. But I said, we need to have a fan. Would it be okay if Clinton Brown, who all the players knew all these years, and he has a job at Cablevision, he drives a car, he's got a girlfriend, and I met him down, and I asked if I could bring him on the ice, and we didn't tell him till 5 minutes before. And we surprised him with the Clinton Brown jersey and walked out, and he's high-fiving. I was lucky to score some goals in life. I feel like, I was very blessed, and I had a lot of support and a lot of help. But you know what? It's all about assists. And I get more excitement. I just mesmerized by, he's high-fiving the players, he's waving the fans, and he dropped the puck, and he got the players all riled up, and come on, and let's go. And we came off the ice, and he said, did I just do that? He goes, Pat, it's the greatest day of my life. Oh my God, I just dropped it. And then there, of course, the social media is all, Clinton. And that's what I loved most about that night, was it was a building with the greatest fans, Stanley Cup runs, holding the sparklers during the national. You can't do that now.
No.
Smoke alarms.
That was an 80s thing.
There's some crazy stuff. And the fans, and so I thought it was only fitting that the team played so well and brought back the memories, 30 sellouts. But it goes back to Al Arbour, Bill Torrey, Eddie Westfall, all the great players that were like a family who got involved with the community, and the community supported them, and it became this really special family, and arguably the greatest 5 years of a sports team in the history of sports. And so to see that bring, because there were a lot of years where we kind of lost that. So to see that excitement come back brought back memories, and people were saying, "You're going to go to the playoff game?" I said, "No, I want to remember."
He was right there that night.
I just want to remember Clinton. My family was there because my son and my daughter, they weren't even born. Sarah was born. They're 25, 23, and 20 now. So two of them weren't even born. So to have them come back into the Coliseum and drop the puck with Clinton, his mom and dad, and had a bunch of buddies and friends, that's how I wanted to remember the great barn, the Coliseum. Great memories.
Your dad told me a story when we spoke that when early years with the Islanders, he was waiting for you after a game and was waiting, and you were signing and talking to the fans, and he was waiting, and he was totally understandable. And when you got there, you said, "I have to meet the people. They're my fans. Every last one of them I want to connect with, make eye contact with, shake their hands." And he was so proud that you did that night after night after night. Did that come back to you in that final game, the memory of that type of dynamic, that connection with the people and the closeness and your dad?
There's a couple nights. The Al Arbour 1500 game was another night, and that night was special. And when I was 5 or 6, I had to be about 7. I went to my first Red Wing game at Olympia before Joe Louis. And there were players in their equipment standing out signing, and I was running to get one of the players. I'll remember his name, but I won't say his name. And just as I was going to get there to get an autograph, he turned around, and I like to think he didn't see me, and maybe he didn't. But I remember what it felt like. And so I always said if I was ever in a position, I never forgot what it felt like to not get his autograph when I was running over to see him. And I don't blame him. He may not have saw me. He might have been, I don't know. So I always said if I'm in a position where I'll just do the best I can and try to sign everyone, because even though it might be a lot of people, that's the first time you might be seeing that person. And you have an obligation. And I think hockey players, it's kind of it's a fraternity. You're not just a hockey player. You have to, there are more values and core values, and what it means to be a hockey player is not just being on the ice. And so there's been a tradition of what it means to be a hockey player. And whether you're a National Hockey League player, college player, minor league, it's a small fraternity. And I was blessed and honored to be a part of that and still a part of that fraternity.
And finally, you work with the league now. You're involved in a lot of different efforts. How satisfying is it to still be giving back to the game, to add all your experience and history and people and all the people you've encountered, and bring that to your current role with the league?
You know, Allan, it's come full circle. Gary Bettman and Bill Daly, Commissioner Bettman and Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly, to really say that they've been tremendous. I think one of the things the league's done that's pretty amazing, I give them a lot of credit, is that they've evolved. There was a time, there was a divide years ago between players and owners, and there was a disconnect. And now, you know, I think the league, we've got former players working there, PA. There's good financial harmony, although we've had to go through struggles to get there, but I don't think the game's ever been better. I think everybody has a passion and cares about the game and the growth of this game and the future of the game. So to come full circle and to work at the National Hockey League has also been an honor and a privilege. And to take those experiences that were on the ice and collectively bring it to the NHL with the business side of everything and then the growing of the game. I can tell you that there's a real push from the National Hockey League to be a progressive league, to be, you know, for instance, NHL green, sustainability, the whole piece of giving back in your communities, the caring for the next generation, the grassroots, the outdoor game, going back to our roots. to me, I'm honored and privileged to say that I'm a hockey player. I think the identity of what it means to be a hockey player, I think the values are there. And it's taught me so much about my life. And so I have the game to thank. We always taught that nobody's bigger than the game. The game was the core that brought me everything that's brought me here tonight. So I'm grateful to the game of hockey.
And just to add, Stan, he said something about, and I don't even know this, even in my long intern in the Coliseum years, there was apparently a secret word between you guys.
Oh, am I allowed to say it?
So
here?
I don't know. I don't even know what it is. If it's
Can I say it?
if it's not one of the swear words, I suppose
It's not a swear word.
fair.
It's not in French either. Although I learned some Czechoslovakian swear words too. But so Stan and Shirley had this forever long going special word. It's basically like knocking on the door, and he said, just remember one thing, the password is swordfish.
Okay, not a surprise. Groucho Marx would be proud.
So every time I see him, and even as he recently wanted to be here, his assistant, Rini, I texted him, just tell him I said the password is swordfish. And he started laughing. I don't know if that was good. But
Should be fine.
If you want to have fun with Al, with Stan,
Okay.
you want to have fun with him, just say the password is swordfish.
He told me your relationship was so meaningful because he said to this day you're the only hockey player who invited Stan and Shirley to their wedding.
Yeah.
So
1987. I can remember it's almost 28 years. Yeah, 29 years.
wow.
Yeah, goes by fast. But it's been a fun ride. And Alan, I want to thank you because we've had a lot of fun.
Tremendous.
Thank you because,
Good.
yeah.
Awesome stuff. Excellent.
Thank you.
Pat, do you have some time to take a few questions?
No, I'd
from
be
the
happy
audience?
to. And thank you for all coming tonight also.
How do you feel about the current overtime situation where the game has changed and it's 3-on-3? Do you feel that that's a good idea or not?
I like the 4-on-4 also. I think the attention it's given to the skill of the game, I think the percentage is almost 60%. Sometimes it was 70% early in the season. I think there was a push to not have the shootout just become too mundane. And I would say Kenny Holland, who is the general manager of Detroit Red Wings, I think it was his idea and push to create the 3-on-3. We evolved to 4-on-4, which was exciting. We've evolved to 3-on-3. Excuse me. I do believe it's brought a lot of attention, a lot of excitement. For the traditionalists, it may not be easy, but if we're trying to grow, and we are in the entertainment business too, and it is a great game and it does have culture, I think it just gives a whole nother perspective and perception of our game. And so, although it may not be traditional, we have a bunch of kids that are wanting to play 3-on-3 and wanting to just play hockey and are excited. It is an exciting, 5 minutes, is it 6? 5 minutes. They're going to try to do 6. There was a push to do 4-on-4 for 3 minutes and then 3-on-3 for 3 minutes and do 6 minutes. And then they decided we need to see more goals in overtime. And so I think they've achieved that. I will say this to you, I'm on the edge of my seat because almost 3/4 of the time somebody's going to score. And it also goes to show you that we're not that good of anaerobic athletes. When we're 5-on-5, you can kind of measure, and we think we're going all out for a minute. 3-on-3, you're going all out for a minute. You see a guy's legs just basically leave him. And so that part of the excitement of knowing there's probably going to be a goal scored and seeing things you've never seen, I think it's been good entertainment for our game. In the back?
I got to tell you, I'm a Sabres fan. So, referencing the Sabres years, when you were under John Muckler, and he was the old Edmonton coach, and was kind of run and gun with McGillney and the rest of them. You guys are scoring over 100 points. I'd like you to just compare and contrast the game in those days to what we're seeing today. Even though we've taken out the red line and we're trying to score goals, things just seem a lot different. It's more, is it a better athlete? Is it a different game? Is it a better game overall? Compare and contrast those days to what's going on.
Yeah, it's a good question. Allan alluded to back then. A lot of people don't know, but my years, special years in Buffalo, and the 1 year, 92, 93, we were on pace, and we would have been the first line in the history of hockey where actually all three guys had 50 goals on one line. And we had traded Dave Anachuk about a week before the trade deadline, and he had 45 goals for Grant Fuhrer. You know, obviously two great players. And he ended up with 55 goals. Alex had 76 goals. So that year, everything was clicking, and it was all speed. It reminded me of the early 80s with the Edmonton Oilers with flying around out there. So I loved it. I love the skating game. Today, the athletes, they're bigger. They're more skilled. They're faster. They train 12 months a year. Their body fat's like 5%. They're amazing athletes. And so I think, although I think we skated really well back then, I think the quality of the player is all at a high level now. And the systems and the video so everybody has an idea of what's happening all the time, where back then it was a little more free-flowing, and you could, and the interesting thing, there was a red line. So it's a good analogy, because by taking away the red line, we should be faster, and I think they are faster. I think the biggest thing now that kind of hits me is really the goaltending. The goalies are now, the average size of a goaltender back then was 6 foot. They're like all 6'5" now. And the equipment, if you go do a picture of how much net we used to see versus what you see now, I think the goaltending has had a big influence on, you got to put that puck exactly, because there's not much room, and they're all so talented. So it's evolved. I love to watch the game. I love the skating part of it. And we're continually evolving all the time. But I remember those special years with McGillney and Anachuk and Howard Chuck and Audette and Doug Bodger. It was a lot of fun.
And Brad May.
Brad May, crazy. But Rob Ray, too. There you go. It's the Rick Jenneret, one of the Hall of Famer, the all-time great. There are times when I'm even in New York City, and then someone behind me is like, LaFontaine, and
I know.
It's funny how a call like that'll stick. And I used to make shirts, but I loved my time in Buffalo. It was a lot of fun.
I think we have time for one more question.
Sure.
When you were talking about your experience in 1984, you mentioned Tim Taylor, who actually, growing up in New Haven, he was actually my next door neighbor, and so it's a really
Great man.
important person for USA Hockey. And but speaking of that, I just want to ask you, as an American who went to play junior hockey in Canada, if you could talk a little bit about your thoughts on the experience today. For American kids, looking to break into the NHL or move up, with the expansion of the USHL and the NHL, AHL, and the creation of College Hockey Inc. And so, there's this conflict for kids. Do they stay here and play college, or do they go play major junior up in Canada?
Well, it's a great question, because it's one of the things I'm working at the National Hockey League is how do we create pathways, and how do we create age-appropriate development. We're doing a good job, but how can we be better and possibly work together? So it's one of the only sports with the eligibility issues where if you do go play junior hockey in Canada, you lose your eligibility if you play major hockey to go play college. if you make that decision at 15, 16, 17, even 18. So that's something that we're talking about now at the league, and with hoping to see if there's ways of working together to create the best development model. And I think we've done a great job under the rules and under the system, but so that's one of the major things that I'm a part of doing right now. The year I left in 1981, 82 to play in Verdun was a year I'll never forget. I was lucky that I was 16. Ron Mason was going to give me a full scholarship to Michigan State. And he said, you know, you don't want to leave and play junior hockey because you'll never get drafted, and you want to stay here. And the junior leagues in Detroit at that time weren't what they are today. I mean, the U.S. hockey programs, USA Hockey and USHL and all has grown exponentially, and there's so many great choices too for kids. But back then, I told my mom and dad, I said, listen, I want to go and play where I think the best place I can develop at 17. And I said, if I don't make it by 20, I promise you I'll come back and go to college. I wouldn't have been able to play hockey because I would have foregone that. And that's still the way it is today. It's stuff we're looking at and issues that we're looking at now. But fortunately enough, in Montreal, having a name, LaFontaine, being an American in Montreal, they embraced it, and I lived with a wonderful billet family and had an experience. It was a storybook year, and Allan and I have talked about it, but they treated me in a great way, and they actually allowed an American player to become the Canadian Junior Player of the Year up there in Canada. So I'm grateful to that opportunity, and grateful to develop and have played for USA Hockey in Olympics and World Cups and World Championships. To this day, you know, one of the greatest memories I'll ever have is the 1996 World Cup. And I guess that's probably a fitting end, because next year is the World Cup, and it was 20 years earlier that the United States won the World Cup. And when I said there was a bunch of young American boys who watched the 1980 team win a gold medal, well, 16 years later, all of those hungry boys and young men wanted to give back to United States what was given to them, the inspiration of the 1980 Olympic gold medal team, and we somehow found a way to beat Canada 3-2 in the last 2 games in Montreal and win the World Cup in '96. And I think that I believe that helped inspire a whole other generation. So, but we've come a long way, and there's still some areas where I think we're working at to become better in the development. But it's a great question.
I have one last question, small one. 16, your number.
Oh yeah.
This is
Good question.
2016. We've talked about the symmetry of your book coming out in 2016. How
Yeah.
did 16 become your number?
So I was always number 7 as a kid up until I was 16. And I went to Montreal, and I turned to the trainer and said, he said, broken English, what number do you want? And I said, can I have number 7? I said, oh, Benoit Lafleur, you can't have that number. No. Veteran number. I have a number for you. He said, number says. So I knew from my French studies I was 16. And he said, 1 + 6, 7.
7. Perfect.
Pat, Allan, thank you so much
Great.
for this really wonderful conversation.